Hospitality Meets is brought to you by RotaCloud, the simple workforce management software for hospitality teams. RotaCloud lets you create and share rotas, record attendance, and manage your team's annual leave, all in less time than it takes to make a brew. It can also make life easier for your staff, allowing them to check their rotas, request holiday, and even pick up extra shifts, all through the RotaCloud mobile app. Start your 30-day free trial today by visiting rotacloud.com/Phil and find out how much easier managing your team can be. Welcome to this bonus episode of Hospitality Meets with me, Phil Street. Today's guest is the awesome host of Hospitality Mavericks podcast, Michael Tingsager. Michael and I met for the first time in mid-2024 whilst recording for another show, and this led to us knocking our heads together to collaborate on today's bonus, where we delve into what we've learned from interviewing a combined of over 500 conversations with hospitality professionals. Despite this being a collaborative chat, Michael takes the reins on hosting, and the show is all the better for it, as we delve into topics such as adversity and resilience, trust and human connection, and of course the diverse contributions of our guests from over the years. This is all underpinned by the power of conversation, and I hope you will agree that this is a fascinating conversation of discovery with some learnings that you may not have seen coming. But that's enough for me. Grab your favourite brew, make sure you give us a subscribe, a like and a share, and I hope you enjoy.
In the end of the year, it's always good to, meet people. I would actually prefer that Phil and I met in London or wherever we could meet and over a good meal, but it's not possible that the calendar is stacked as many others, but we still wanted to have this conversation where we've done all these episodes. We've done more like, 500 episodes with hospitality leaders. We were talking about that, Phil and I, on another call. And, there's lots of things that's come out of that. And we actually want to share some of those learnings, actually, what we actually learned interviewing these people. There's lots of, profile. There's also people that's just operators. There's people that's like delivering into the industry. All these different people that sees the industry and actually wants the best for the industry. And we thought we want to share some of those learnings.
Yeah, I think that's totally summarised wonderfully, as always. But also, I think, I find it quite remarkable that it's taken us this long to do this, actually. Yeah. We're kind of both conversation-led, aren't we? That's part of our lives, that we love to have conversations with people. I'm just a massive believer that conversations are the thing that moves things forward. Yeah. Certainly they're the starting point to moving things forward. Obviously, action probably trumps conversation in the end, but you've got to have the conversation first to make the action happen.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And we should have done an episode a long time ago. And actually, we actually said that we wanted to do 2 interviews was the idea. So first I came on yours or the other way around, but then we thought let's just do one together and share it at the same time on each show, because actually, there's no reason to tell the same story twice. So we actually thought it would be a more impactful conversation.
Yeah, and indeed, and I think probably the key word there is conversation, right? It's not an interview as such. It's just 2 podcasters having a chat about the stuff that we've learned.
Yeah, and it's really about focusing on these big learnings from hospitality. And then I think one of the lovely things, Phil, I think that's we both believe in that, the human part of hospitality is so important. It starts, to build relationships with people. You need to start with the conversation. As a good friend, Kieran, also would said, everything good starts from a good conversation. So actually, that's what we're going to try to do today. So, Phil, I wanted to start, what has what has surprised, inspired you most by interviewing hundreds of hospitality leaders through the years?
Yeah, it's a great opener, right? And there's so many things, I think, that you pick up from everybody's individual journey, which is obviously the sit on the fence answer. But for me, I think the biggest surprise for me, actually, was how many people end up where they are by accident a little bit.
I love that. Yeah.
And I don't mean that as that, wake up one day and go, how am I here? Of course, there's there's mechanisms that you go through to, and the decisions and the opportunity that comes your way. But I can probably count on one hand the number of my guests who knew early on in their life, this is what I want to do, and that's what I'm going to work towards. The rest have all kind of and opportunities, they kind of are maybe fallen into the industry. That's also another kind of key thing
That's
that
a
happens a lot.
key phrase I've heard a lot of times. Yeah.
And then you get to a point where you go, okay, actually, I'm doing well here. I'm enjoying this. So maybe this is the thing for me. And then opportunity starts to present itself and people start to build their career, not because they've sat down with a piece of paper and strategized how they're going to become a general manager by the time they're 30, which is something else I hear a lot, or, I want to be a CEO or whatever. It's people a lot of people are just head down, crack on, do your best work, an opportunity will present itself. And then at that point, you can make a decision as to, okay, is this the right opportunity for me? Does it feel right? Maybe that is the time for a piece of paper and a pen to write out pros and cons and all of that stuff. And then, you look back in 30 years and go, oh my God, I've done quite well. I've done quite well in this industry. And you don't really know why. It just kind of has crept up on you. And so that's been I found that I didn't expect that. I did not expect that at all. I expected everybody that I was going to, talk to had a clear idea what they wanted to achieve. And, they had a clear plan as to how they were going to get there. But the reality is very, very different.
Do you also think that's part of the challenge? There's been a lot of, I think we talked a bit about on the interview we did together with some other podcasters recently, the challenge around the industry. It's not an attractive place to work. Do you think that's also because if you have that kind of thought about, I just fall into it, it was not really a decision. It's not like being a doctor or solicitor or, a finance person.
Yeah. I think that's a really good point, actually, because you're probably right. I think there's probably a branding problem somewhere along the line that people look upon this as something that you fall into and then you'll figure it out, rather than something that you say, do you know what, this could be, look at where this industry could take me. Look at, if I start here doing this role and I graft and I work and I, do all the things that I need to do that I can control to become excellent, then look at what awaits me down the line. And because, there's loads of stuff that we don't talk nearly enough about with the industry, right? I mean, it's such a fast growth industry. The opportunity is amazing.
Yeah.
And yet, for some reason, there's a big disconnect between, I think, our own perceptions of those who already work in it versus those who don't.
Yeah, and I think it's quite interesting. My mom was an operator, a number of different kind of food, and she always said there's like two things that are certain. We have to eat and we're gonna die. So there's two businesses that's good to be in, and there will always be opportunity if you can find them. It's in food and hospitality, and then being an undertaker, which is quite brutal, but she's very true about that. And I see the world actually, even though how hard it is now. When it's hard, there's also going to become opportunity after that wave. Whenever it's done, I don't know. I don't have the crystal ball, but I think it's going to be a super interesting industry to be in. And we're going to talk a bit about the future later in the conversation.
Yeah, totally. I think the other thing on that point actually is that you realize very, very quickly that every single person out there who has built a career in whatever that looks like has faced adversity at some point.
Yeah.
And it's just a question of how big our own perceptions of that adversity are. So COVID is obviously a piece of adversity that we all share. But through the other side of things like that, there's amazing stuff happens. And it's the same in your own life when you face, simple adversity through your own health, through your family's health, through all of these different things. These are all inevitable parts of building a life. I had a chat actually this morning with Simon Casson from Corinthia Hotels. Top bloke. Big shout out to Simon. And he was talking about the very same thing around, you kind of you need to understand that you are going to face adversity in your life.
Yeah, struggle is part of life, yeah.
Yeah. So there's no point in kind of skirting around it or trying to avoid it or, just not suggesting that you run towards it, but actually at least embracing it a little bit will mean that you'll actually come out the other side with a greater skill set that you don't even know you're learning in the moment, and notwithstanding the resilience that we all need to be able to forge ahead in times for when the next piece of adversity comes along, and so on and so forth.
It was quite interesting. You just made me think, and I've been thinking a bit about what would be my take on this. And actually, one of the things that really surprised me, it's also, that it really connects with that thing. I fall into it, but also by people that actually comes from a different world. You have barristers, solicitors, you have bankers, you have accountants, you have historian, you have people that want to be a journalist, and they come into the industry and they brought something with them into this industry and made it better. And I can definitely, there's a couple of interviews become very clear to me over the years as well, was Ari from Singerman's in the US. People who listen to my show, he's been on 4 times. He's an incredible founder of Singerman's community of businesses. He was a historian in Russian history, an anarchist, a totally different world. And then he ended up as a dishwasher because he needed to make some money. And now he's the CEO of a company he built together with Paul, he was working with in that restaurant. And then there's Nisha Katona from Mowgli's. Most people know in the UK, a lawyer, a solicitor, working in Liverpool as a solicitor. And then she built this amazing food businesses because again, people also come into this industry because they are hungering that connection, the human connection, I think, what we call hospitality as well. And they believe they can build something that's quite incredible with their skills. So I think there's lots of skills in the industry we sometimes forget as well, the quality we actually have as a talent pool. And there's been so much negativity around the industry. And I just see all these really, really competent people that can work through struggles, as you say. The resilience level in this industry, and I'm not trying to say people are not resilient in other industries, but I'm just amazed of how people get up time after time when they're facing adversity.
Yeah, we're constantly getting punched in the face, it seems like sometimes with everything that's going on at the minute. I totally. And do you know the other thing that you realize as well is that the kind of the skill of hospitality is also prevalent in a great deal many other sectors. Yeah. And those sectors don't talk about that. And we don't talk about that. But, you think about even a legal firm, let's stick with lawyers as an example. They have to go out and they have to win business. And the way that you win business generally is by building trust. And you build trust by being hospitable to people and kind and, full of empathy for their scenario and situation. And these are all personality traits that absolutely have their roots in hospitality. And we don't talk about that nearly enough. And this is for me why I will bang on until the cows come home that hospitality is the greatest industry on earth, because if you listen to the media, you remember that time when they were talking about it's low skilled and all of that. I mean, I could not disagree more. It's it's the greatest skill in the world to be able to connect with somebody and make them feel special and make them feel heard and make them feel like, I found my place. So all of these other sectors, whenever there's any kind of human interaction, medical, retail, even manufacturing, engineering, all of these, I suppose, what are perceived to be less human-led industries, there's no way in the world you can build something that is groundbreaking and original and amazing if you're not entertaining hospitality skills to help get other people at that table with you to make it happen.
Yeah, and I think you're so spot on, Phil. And I was sitting and thinking about, I had a conversation this about a year ago, a guy called Edward Hess, and he talks a lot about AI and what they're going to do to jobs, and especially lots of jobs we know them today. But he actually talked about the industry you are in, and he's a professor in this. He's not really in the hospitality industry. He said that's really the time for hospitality to rise, because it's all about creating that, bringing more humanity into the world. And it's a really difficult skill because we're almost being, in many other parts of our life, we're sitting here online now, we're actually being de-skilled in having human conversations and actually having empathy and creating meaningful human interaction. And in this time of where the world is, there's so much disconnection, and we're not going to go into politics, embracing hospitality can really be part of what heals community and sparks, this, positive change we want to see. So actually, as you say, what I've learned is like this hospitality thing. It's not like about service depth. It's about actually how you become a better human, actually. And because the journey you go through in a hospitality career, you actually are, you're actually meeting so much, struggle, but that actually makes you resilient. And therefore, you actually, if you embrace that and you use that in the right way, you become a better human being. And actually, therefore, we can use hospitality as that universal act of making the world a better place, I believe.
Yeah, totally. And there's all manner of stories from people's individual stories.
Yeah.
Who have, overcome these moments whereby, something's just happened. Like, I can't remember who it was. I think it might have been, who was it? It's unimportant anyway, but there was a story about them doing a new opening, massive site. It was a pub group. And on the opening day, the people kept on trying to break through the fire escape as an exit. The fire alarms kept on going off all the time. Sprinkler system came on at one point. All of these things that, with the best planning in the world, stuff just happens sometimes. And you can't plan for everything. A lot of the planning that happens is retrospective in that respect. That to get around what's come up. But in the moment, do you then learn what you're made of? And that's been the joy of listening to some of these stories from people around the industry, where they've all got a story like that, whereby something didn't go quite according to plan, but rather than sitting in a corner and crying about it, you kind of you have to deal with it head on, which is how you get round the stuff that happens.
And it's quite interesting you say planning. One of the things I've seen as well is that, like, the really good operators, leaders, they are very good at planning, but they are also, you can hear that when you interview, but they accept that their plan is just there to be broken. And then it's about flowing with it and actually then, been trained for that situation. So there's a lot of this, lots of people call it firefighting, but that's not what they do. Actually, they're totally in control of what's happening in that moment because they're preparing themselves for that and they planned themselves for doing that. Because again, hospitality is about humans. It's about food. It's about a property. It's about all these moving parts, but actually it's about actually how you flow and ebb with it, in and out of it. It's a bit like, running an orchestra in a way where the trumpet goes a bit off and you need to get it dialed back in.
Yeah, I haven't run an orchestra before, so but I hear what you're saying.
I had a guest who was really interested about orchestra. He said he was a jazz musician in his spare time as well. And he said hospitality is the same like a jazz band, apparently, because it's lots of different people coming together. And sometimes actually you don't even know the team you're being put into because you maybe gone to another property or another restaurant that evening. And actually you have to make it work very quickly. So great hospitality is like playing like a jazz band. You just go in and you jam, but you jam because you've learned some basic skills somewhere on your journey if you had a good employer. So that's a very good way. One of the last things I was thinking about, and you maybe have some more, but I was thinking one of the things I noted down as I'm preparing for this as well, like the willingness to share, if it's your time, your skills, your network, it's also incredible. Definitely when I talk with hospitality leaders and what they're willing to help you with, where you think, you have a busy job, you may be CEO founder, but still they go out and help their colleagues or they help you if you ask them to. And I've been a bit in the tech world and I've been a bit like in medico, and I didn't feel there was the same community of sharing and giving as I feel in this industry. And we sometimes forget that actually and celebrate that, how willing we're actually to help each other, even though we're in competition.
I could not agree more. I actually made the same note in terms of the willingness to share. I think it's such an endearing quality of the industry, generally speaking, is that, we're all monumentally busy, and to the point sometimes where I look at my diary and go, how did that happen? Like, But still, there's a willingness out there when you go to somebody and say, can you help me with this? Or do you know somebody who might be able to help me with this? The answer is always yes. Like there's not even a barrier put up with people. I think it's such a wonderful trait of this industry and the people that I've been lucky enough to interview so far on the show. So yeah, could completely agree with you on that one.
Do you have feel like when you interviewed all these leaders, a moment where you thought, wow, this is just stand out for me? And it's a tough one because I have to answer as well. There's so many moments. Yeah. There's a moment every time you interview somebody, is there, where you thought, oh, that was really interesting. That profoundly, informed me about something. But is there an interview on your journey where that, wow, that was where I actually got an epiphany, or where I took the show to the next level? Or
yeah, I mean, I'll always remember the day that Raymond Blanc walked into the same room as me, and we had a chat together. I'll never ever forget that. And his story, just does not disappoint in any way. I mean, some of the moments of boldness in that guy's career is just incredible. Really, really inspirational. But actually, there's a way earlier episode for me. I can't remember which episode number it was, but it's a guy called Muhammad Ali. It's not that Muhammad Ali. Mo's story for me was so far removed from my own, in the sense that I was made aware of this guy who had been. He was in prison. He was in the prison system at Brixton Prison. Robert Richardson and Ben Purton, shout out to them, were at a lunch in this said prison through the Clink charity. And Mo was one of the cohort who was just not far away from being released from jail, and he had gone through the Clink process in terms of, he was now trained in restaurant, how to, waitering and all of that kind of stuff. And I remember when Robert and Ben approached me and said, would you interview him? And I went, I don't know. I don't know if it's the message I want to send, but the reality was that I thought, well, let's have the conversation and see what happens. And I was totally, totally blown away by his story. As I say, so far removed from my own, I feel, kind of hammered home to me just really kind of what a privileged life I've led. Really, loving family, supported me 100% of the way. That's a really privileged position to be in. And Mo didn't have any of that. And yet his story for me, when he went through it, and he was so open and honest about everything, to the point where why he served time, he took somebody's life, and he was basically cornered in a situation whereby it was either him or the other guy. And, I think the vast majority of us can't even contemplate being in that position in the first place. So I found that unbelievably powerful, because it was for me a story that totally transcends the industry. Also showed the power of how the industry can help someone move forward in some way and overcome these horrible things that have happened to them in the past. And I remember very clearly when he told me that he pulled the trigger on a shotgun that he had. I was absolutely speechless. And we shared a moment on the show, which I actually edited down because it was quite long. I kind of paused where I had a tear coming out my eye, and he was recounting it, obviously, and he was quite upset about the process that he had taken somebody's life. And I just remember thinking to myself, do you know what? I really think I'm onto something with having chats to people about their story, because that for me is not an inspirational story about how you build a wonderful empire of business. It's just a question of how you come back from the brink. And I hope I'm never in a position where I have to learn how to come back from the brink. No. But he was just kind of living proof to me that whatever your situation is, there's a route back.
Wow, that was a powerful one, Phil. I don't think I haven't had a guest like that, but that's I actually had one. So I'll say to you, I've met some heroes as well, like interviewing Chip Conley, Ari, sitting in an interview in London room with Nisha Katona. Like the first time I met Nisha before I come to my little bit more profound one. Like first time I visited, and it was like the early days of Moni. I went up to Liverpool. I went into their site, one of their key sites up there. We did the interview in there. And you could feel when she came in at that point, at least when, I don't know where it is today, this is 2018, you could feel that they are onto something special because now the CEO had just come in and people are super excited. They're very happy. You can feel there's a special culture going on. And one thing is that you believe that these businesses are out there and they're doing their thing, and you believe that actually Mowgli was all about that. But then when you feel it, and you could just feel the energy in the whole building lifting as the team came together. And, it was not about me first. It was about going around saying hello to the team. And you just saw somebody that cared immensely about their culture. And it was very, very long interview. I think it was longer than what we actually produced in the end. But somebody who really cares about their organization and grafting really, really hard.
And it just kind of proving that it can be done, right? It can be done.
Can be done at scale as well. And I think they slowed down a bit now. But again, and he talked a lot about what I then turned into graceful growth, about how you do it in a graceful way and not just on the compromise of unbalancing either the community or people or your suppliers or anything. But there was actually an interview I did recently on the show, which was and we didn't actually expect it to go that way. And it's quite funny because it was like to be, as you say, a business interview. That was actually the plan with Peter Farrell, who is the MD of Food Motion Network and also runs a food hall. And we actually somehow we ended up talking about adversity. And actually he had come back from having, I think it was three brain tumors,
Oh, wow.
And how actually he used that actually. And he had to stop his really, top performing career. He worked at Dairy King's at some point. So he had to, stop his career in hospitality, and he came back. And now that adversity actually meant coming back to what we talked about before, like going through that and, thinking you're dying to you're in a healing process and actually finding yourself and getting the energy to come back. So he didn't go back just to get a job or an executive job. He built his own businesses because he thought life is too short not to try. And again, it was not framed around that. That was not the pitch, but actually the conversation just went that way. And we also had a moment where I thought, fucking hell, like we're in the same age, and you start thinking about we're actually mortal, and we have to remember that, and we have to take risk. But nothing like what you had. And then I had another interview I made a note of here. I don't know if I can put the name on, but actually one of my guests died shortly after we released the episode.
Jeez.
And he was a well-known operator in London, and he died under COVID in a way. And I'll keep his name under because it's the family they were okay about it was released, but they didn't want lots of. But again, you connect with people, and actually one of the things I've learned is so you build these relationships with people, and you feel you're very close because you've had this interview with them. And I think that's the power of podcasts as well, when you listen to people.
Sure.
But those moments, but I can remember I was meant to go and have, at some point when the restriction, we were meant to meet up in London and have a lunch. And then I reached out to him, and then one of his family member came back and said he's no longer here, which is really, really, really sad. But again, so you just see there's so much emotion than just an interview. There's so many learnings about life in these interviews that you couldn't get anywhere. And some of these moments has really made me think about how I focus in my own life and business.
Yeah. And do you know what? You also highlight again kind of what we were talking about earlier on around that willingness to share. I've been blown away by people's willingness to share kind of the warts and all version of their story. There's not a lot of people that I've had on who are guarding against saying the right or the wrong thing. They're just very open and honest about the journey. And so that willingness to share honestly, even though there are some companies out there where you probably experience this as well, where you've got to go through a PR company first to make sure that. But a lot of the time, the leadership who are having that conversation with you are 100% comfortable with whatever you've spoken about. At the end of the day, I think both of our podcasts are here to elevate. We're not here to tear anybody down, but if we can take learnings from the moments where people have been at their lowest or whatever that might look like, that moment of adversity again, then the willingness to share that amongst pretty much every guest that I've had on has been it's blown me away and probably completely unexpected, to be honest.
Yeah, and that's also what makes it human, isn't it? That's so human. It's a core humanity. That's really what's about, like sharing our lowest moments, because there's probably more, if you're really stoic as I am about things, there's more low points in life than there is high points. And that's just how it is. But you have to find the purpose in that, the meaning in adversity, as Chip Conley actually talked a lot about in episode number 100. He talked about his journey, and I can tell you that's also full of very big low points. But he said, like, as soon as you accept, you have to find meaning in those, as you talked about, the struggle, and how you actually what you learn and what you can use it on the other side. It's actually so powerful stuff.
Yeah.
What are some of the biggest patterns you've seen in over your guests? Is there some specific patterns you see come again and again, like from top class leaders you're interviewing?
I think it's a very good question. I think the main one for me is the willingness to kind of fight for what you believe in, but also kind of fight for your team. Once I suppose this is a two-way street that I've kind of seen in action, that, once the team is engaged and on board and fully in, is then the willingness from what I would maybe classify as the elite leadership, is that this is almost the servant leadership approach, whereby, I'm there for them. I'm not, I think, somebody said, I can't even remember if this was on my own podcast or somebody else's, but they talked about actually, your job as a CEO is to make yourself redundant, basically. Is to basically be ensuring that everybody else around you has the best capability of success, so that if you were to be removed from the business in one day, that the business would go on and wouldn't kind of feel the need for that individual. And I thought that was quite an interesting perspective to have, but I think it's definitely become more prevalent on the back of COVID. I think it's something that through COVID we spoke a lot of, around what an opportunity this is now for the industry to reset. We've probably all done some things in our past that we're not especially proud of, but it's in the past. We have an opportunity to hit the reset button and really strive forward and become the industry that we should be and want to be. And the only way that we do that is through exquisite leadership, and the willingness to make companies wonderful places to work. And generally speaking, the people that I've had on the show all have that ethos about them. People who are in leadership positions, I should say, because I suppose that's the thing for me with the show, is that of course, I'm never going to turn down the opportunity to speak to somebody like Robin Hudson or somebody like that, but at the same time, there are amazing, powerful stories everywhere, as I suppose demonstrated with Mo's story. But from a leadership perspective,
that's super interesting, because some of the best I've actually seen, and I actually did a post on LinkedIn recently about, and you're spot on, like they really live this, fancy word, pop word called servant leadership. And it's totally about what you say. You can feel, Nisha is a great example. I know, go back to our Ari. We can also take, Tom from Honestburger or Phil from Honestburger. And it's all about this, what can I actually do for you to do your best work? Instead of how can I actually help you to hit my targets?
Yeah, exactly.
And it's really what it's about. And I thought I can't remember who said this. One of these people that said that, or maybe it was Ari that talked about that, because we actually did an interview recently about servant leadership. And it's about, again, it's actually not about me and my career as a CEO. It's actually about, as you say, how do I actually in service to the organization? And the best service I can do with the organization is it doesn't need me. I put in the right people in place and I giving them the right tools and resources to do the job well. And I've actually been in service to them and the wider community. And that's really what it's about. And you can see that's what they're talking about from the outset. I love that. I really, really love that.
Yeah. It's inevitable when we've interviewed all these people that we can't remember specifically who said what, right?
No, else you definitely have, because you have to be very well prepared then and analyze the interviews. Which I'm actually trying to do, which is it's quite interesting. We talk about patterns and it's really interesting. And I'm starting to see there's a couple of patterns coming up. And I talked about it a lot. With the book, the Maverick book, and it's become
I've heard about this, Michael.
it's become this overwhelming beast that's taking over my life. So I'm like doing all this, research, which I never thought I was never, very good at, in school or university, to spend a lot of time on research. But I've become like this researcher into my own podcast, and it was really, really interesting. It was like a pattern I started to see, around these people or who they were. And they have high ideals. They're idealists. They are optimists. Think about that. Resilience also comes from this, we can do this. We can get the industry to become great again. There's been lots of that. And lots of them are quite pragmatists as well. They also understand they have to run a business, and they make the necessary decisions to do that. And then the really good ones, when you get, they combine it with the last thing, is like they're incrementalist, I call it, and they build progress slowly. They don't go out and say, I want to be 1,000 restaurants next year. They say, we'll do one restaurant at a time. And I think one of the first I saw that sign was Andreas Carlson for Sticks and Sushi. He was the ops director at the time, now he's the CEO. And he talked a lot about, it's not about 1,000 restaurants, it's about doing a great restaurant one time better. And it has to be better than the other. I think Nisha talks about that again. But again, they have all these patterns. It's them. They're idealists, they dream big and aim high, they're optimists, they believe in a better world as possible. And it's not just about making money, it's actually about making a better industry, a better community, a better planet. And they act on what's achievable. They also accept a lot of the time. I think Marta talked a lot about that from Gales when I had her on. You need to act on what's possible here in the moment, and don't be frustrated about what you can't do yet, but work towards it by acting what's in your control. And then again, they build slowly, one step at a time, and accept that it's not about 1,000, not about 100. Maybe you're going to get to that, but actually every step we take, we do it really, really well. So that's definitely one of the patterns I've seen, and I call it what the Maverick, know and do in principle, when it comes to their own way of viewing themselves as leaders and their organization.
Yeah, no, I love that. I look forward to this book. It sounds fabulous.
We hope so. And now I'm putting it out again, as I said before. I put a bit of fire under the bomb to get it over the line. And then another things we've seen, and that's it was the 7 tenets, which it's in principle around the book, is that they have absolutely clarity of where they're going. They also, I said it before, they don't see growth as the main aim. They have graceful growth. And Nisha talks a lot about that in her books. And then they also focusing on the pursuit of mastery. And I don't know if you've seen that feel as well. They just want to be incredible, good at it in a very difficult situation. They want to control this hospitality experience, and they're putting everything in to become that. And I think you said something before, and that's the next tenet as well. It has this radical transparency. So lots of them are quite open about their learnings and mistakes as well. But also they actually want to talk to customers about what we're doing here. If you think about hospitality compared to other industries, you can actually get a lot of information about a hospitality brand. It's actually quite transparent on the website, and the really good ones are super transparent. So some of them, they share their supply chain, where the produce is from, salaries, everybody find their own level on the transparency, but that's really, really one of the tenets they live as well. And then they're very good at getting, another thing I've seen, give people a stake in the outcome. How do we actually get people? That doesn't mean ownership, but actually, how do we get people involved in running the business? So they actually create business people instead of employees. And they do, one of the things they also do in that connection is they give them lots of freedom to operate. Paddy and Scott is a great business of freedom to operate.
I just thought the same thing, Paddy and Scott's, because I think you've had John on.
John, I think you have had him on as well, haven't you?
Yeah.
And they're really good at staking the outcome and freedom to operate. And then, of course, all this can't happen if you don't build a governance process, an ecosystem that really protects the business, so no other big business can come and gobble them up. And the best one I can think about is Singerman again, where apparently Amazon really want to buy them because they have an e-commerce business, but Ari and the owners have put in the structure. Exactly, it's not sold; it's going over to the employee. It's going to be employee ownership. And where it's all that's come to, this the output that's important here. It's consistent business result. They have positive impact on the world and the communities they're part, and they're building lasting momentum that doesn't die because the CEO steps out. We talked about servant leadership before. But actually, they have this business that continues even when the CEO is no longer around because they build that core. And actually, when you look around, there'll be other hospitality business you would think about that, where you think about, they just continues no matter. Brindisa in London is a great one. Monica Linton is on, thinking they're approaching their 30s or 35 year in business.
Wow,
so it's just incredible. Neil's Yard Dairy is another great business, and they might not always be the famous business, but some of the most long-standing businesses. I think John at Paddy and Scott is really trying to build some of the same things now with the team there.
Yeah. And I've seen that in a few people's stories as well about that the power of community is realizing your place as a business in that. And it doesn't really matter whether you're central London or you're in the middle of nowhere, on a plane in Argentina or whatever. The business kind of almost has a duty to realize its worth to the local community. And, I remember, this is not actually a conversation I've had on the podcast, but I'd love to get him on if he's out there listening. And that's Chris Agler from the Belfry. I think the reason why he probably won't come on a one-to-one podcast is that he's very openly introverted. And I hope he doesn't mind me saying that in public. He has actually said that on another podcast that we did as a group. But I remember talking to him about the fact that, when you look at a business like the Belfry as an example, I can't remember the exact figure of how many employees that they have, but I would suggest it's somewhere in the region of about 300. But then you look through the employee list, and in there you've got mothers, fathers, sons, daughters, grandparents in some respects, and 3 generations of the same family working in the hotel.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So, and that's the impact from a community perspective is wonderful in that respect, because you're kind of safeguarding your future through that reputation as a local employer, but also then the impact that your profit can have on your local community as well, and some of the other things that I'm trying to think of something off the top of my head, but even things like I had a chat actually on one of the other podcasts I run with people in York who had set up an into-work scheme with an open prison in York. And basically they were working with local hotels to have a number of employees from the open prison system come and do work for them. And, it's having conversations like that for me that have really identified one that, and I can probably recount most story again with this, is that level of bias that exists within us all. The wonderful thing about running a podcast and having conversations is that the minute that you realize when you park that bias at the door and just go with the conversation is when you get all the real gold out of the world, out of the stuff that's going on around us, under our nose, all day, every day, because there are way more people out there that care than don't. And sometimes I think, we're probably led to believe through media outlets and the likes that actually the world's full of, arseholes and we're all doomed and everything's bad. But the reality for me is, and certainly my own experience is that the vast majority of people out there have their heart in the right place and are trying to do good work. They're maybe just operating within a framework that you and I are not familiar with.
Yeah, no, sometimes you don't, and you can have I think like, it's quite interesting, one of the things you think something about a business, or you have a perception this is what they do in that business, and actually you find out it's all up to the individuals within that business. That can be, as I say, maverick in a huge corporate business. It doesn't need to be evil, all of it. There's actually very good pockets of it. Well, if it was very evil, it would probably disappeared. Like lots of people say, Starbucks is evil or McDonald's is evil. I've been with myself, and actually, like in any big business or any big organization or any workplace, there'll be leaders that's good and there's leaders that's not doing such a great job. It's about how do you balance that out faster, and I think some organizations really get it right. The smaller they are, the easier it is to do that. But it doesn't mean that small organization is better than biggers, because we need them all and we need the ecosystem to work. And I think we then need to use the smaller businesses where you can do all the incredible things around, culture and so on, and influence the biggest. But you have, what I say, mavericks in all different kinds. And you don't have to be a leader as well to be interesting, because you also do change by doing, as you say, there's lots of people that care, especially in hospitality. There's some frontline employees that, never become the CEO, but when you meet them, they do incredible things, and I think that's a really interesting conversation to have with people. Like, how can you actually get the front line of hospitality more involved, so you can start understanding how many incredible people there's there on the more from the human perspective. But I think it's really, really interesting as well that as a podcaster, you learn to take your guards down. And we all have ideas about how people are, and we can't take that away. That's the ego control. But I would say it made me a better human interviewing all these people, because I found out actually that's the only way, is actually if you are not having perception and thoughts about how they operate, then there's a bigger chance your audience will learn from that, because they open up. They can feel that you are not. You're just curious. You're asking much better questions. Yeah.
5-star hospitality means having the right people in the right place at the right time, and that's exactly where RotaCloud can help. RotaCloud is the online platform that makes planning rotas, recording attendance, and managing annual leave easy. Its simple, drag-and-drop interface lets you create and share rotas with your team in minutes, while our built-in budgeting tools mean you'll know exactly how much you're spending on staffing before sending the rota out. RotaCloud also makes life easier for your staff, allowing them to check their rotas, request time off, and pick up extra shifts, all through the RotaCloud mobile app. Start your 30-day free trial today by visiting rotacloud.com/Phil and find out how much easier managing your team can be.
Yeah, totally. You summarized this wonderfully for me when we had our chat recently. I think you classify your podcast as your personal MBA. And I thought, you've nailed exactly what this is. And, okay, we might not end up with a rolled up scroll of, a certificate at the end of it to say that we are now masters of business administration or whatever was that what it stands for? I can't remember.
Yeah, it is.
But this is life learning, right? This is not, as you quite rightly say, you park your ego and your bias at the door before you have an interview with somebody, and you let them get into their flow state about talking about them and what they have done. Then the chances are it doesn't really matter whether you agreed with them or not at the beginning. You're going to learn something from that person. You're going to learn something about their worldview that might be different from your own worldview. And I just think that we're probably losing this capability. I think we alluded to this at the beginning. We're losing this capability as a species because of this propensity to do everything like we're doing ironically today virtually as opposed to deep connection.
I think that is not the media. I think it's like the effectiveness we want to run our life on. I think that's what I'm thinking when you're saying that. Like, we want to be so over effective that we are not really becoming better. We're just doing more of the same, faster.
Yeah. Well, and I suppose the information just comes at you at 1 billion miles an hour now, doesn't it? From all angles. And our brain, certainly my brain, can't cope with it anymore. I have to take the moments to be able to have these chats, because they're actually the circuit breaker and the melee that goes through your brain. And having a conversation with somebody, for me, is the moment really whereby you can hit the reset button on your head. You're thinking. Usually I walk out of every interview that I've ever done with an epiphany of some description, and I immediately go and tell the wife, because it's like, oh, did you ever thought about it from this perspective? And I think if we all did that, I'm not suggesting everybody goes out and starts a podcast, but if we all just had deeper, more meaningful conversations with each other, what's the phrase? We all believe that we're active listeners, but the vast majority of us are listening to respond, not listening to whatever.
To understand. Listen to understand. It's Stephen R.
I wasn't even listening.
It's Stephen R. Covey. Stephen R. Covey. That's I can't remember the quote exactly, but it's in that direction. We all listen to respond, not to understand. I think it's something like that.
Yeah, and I'm definitely guilty of that on sometimes. Ooh. Because the moment whereby you think, oh, I've got something intelligent to say, it's like that doesn't happen very often. So I've got to let this person finish. But regardless of whether they've said something that then I need to follow on, I kind of want to get this thing out. So that's been a massive learning for me, is through the years of doing podcasting now, is that I'd really try to stop that voice in my head that goes off and says, oh, say something. Actually, no, let them finish what they're saying and be listening to what they're saying, so that we can move the conversation on the right way, as opposed to the way that you feel gives your voice the best tone, as it were. And that's tough. It's hard to do.
And it's quite interesting you say that. I almost want to ask you about, do you have an approach? Do you have some steps you take to get these great conversations? Because now we're talking about how you extract these informations out of people to learn yourself, but also your audience would learn from that. Have you developed an approach to that, or is that a skill you unconscious learned as you've been doing it?
I think a lot of it is unconscious. I think probably has its roots deeply in just enjoying conversation with people, just for your pure, simple ethos in that respect. But I think it also stems from actually probably, again, a kind of hospitality learning of just trying to make somebody feel comfortable in your company. I think just goes a million miles. And that's all I ever try to do with the people that come on any platform I do, because you have to remember as well, the willingness to share is positive, but sometimes people are not comfortable when you put a microphone in front of their face, and
the game changes. The game changes suddenly. It's you and me, or you and I, in principle, and I now need to perform.
Yeah, absolutely. And I 7-8 years ago, I'd have been that person. But in terms of just somebody wants to have me on a public forum saying something, no way, I'm not doing that. No way. But so I think just making people feel as comfortable as possible. I think a lot of the people that we get on both of our shows are, quite confident individuals anyway, quite, as we've spoken about, confident to share and all of that. But I do think there is a maybe even an unwritten art form in being able to get somebody to a point where they will, share the deepest parts of their soul with you.
And it's quite interesting. I have had some guests, I'm not going to mention them, but actually where it was their first podcast interview, and I thought they had so much to share. And it took me a very, very long time to get them on the show. And even though you're thinking about every day they show up in front of lots of people, they do what they do their best that day, were like, I don't want to share it, not because it was secret, but I'm actually doing such a great thing, I think it was. And then, if you're super introverted on the top, how do you then actually build that trust? And actually, that's like where you had multiple conversations with them, and you find out actually how important it is to prepare well for every conversation, even though if people are confident, because you're actually putting them under, even though you don't put them under pressure with, 60 minutes question, it's not like any interrogation of them and they've done something wrong. But again, it's like you have a huge, opportunity both to get the best out of them, but also you can harm them a lot. So actually there is like that element of where you have to go and build that trust. And there's some of those conversations as I got them on the show. That's some of the best interviews. I think it's like some of them have the most downloads. Funny enough, it's not the most famous names, but
yeah,
that interview has just like run like wildfire because, and you don't always know which one it is, but actually often I can see there's a pattern around those people as really like now they're comfortable and then they share with trust in the interviewer, and actually the insight that comes out of them is incredible what they share on their learnings.
Yeah, I could not agree more.
One of the things I've been thinking, I don't know if you feel the same, like, one of the things I've learned by doing all these things is like, great outcomes, like keeping a show going or running a business. Success doesn't really come without you build relationship. And actually, podcast or interviewing people becomes a lot about building relationship with people. It's like, we're sitting here today because we slowly have built that relationship of trust, and now we'll see what the outcome is. But there's no great outcomes that comes without, putting relationship first. And actually, doing podcasts and have these interviews with people, you also find out that's how one of the things, and maybe come a bit back to the patterns again, want to see many of these great leaders are very aware about the quality of the relationship they have with people inside or outside their organization. It's very important for them, and therefore they have these great outcomes. And we often forget that. Again, coming back to what you said, we are so busy, we become almost transactional sometimes in what we do.
Yeah. I mean, that has its roots in the that old cliche of no man is an island. Where are we? Where are any of us without the relationships that we can build? And I would probably even argue to a point, having had all of these conversations with people, that not one of these people would have had success had they been loners, and just wanted to go at it on their own. The key, as I can see it, is to bring people on that journey with you, and be clear in the vision and let people see it openly and transparently, and then it just becomes clearer as to how you're going to get ahead. But that in itself is a relationship building mechanism, right? I mean, you without building the relationship of your executive team, without building the relationship with your troops on the floor, whatever that structure looks like within your business, that's the thing for me that I've definitely taken from every episode that I've done is that yes, there can be individual talent and vision and all of that, but you can never really truly enact a vision on your own, I would suggest.
No, because great relationship then leads to better thought leads to better action, and better action leads to better results. And I think I learned this from a guy called Mike Owen I had on the podcast, and he was actually a very good example of what I talked about before. Very difficult to get a yes. He said yes, but getting the date in the calendar. And I found out actually he needed to feel much more comfortable about that he was actually a super expert in what's called the service profit chain, which is built on quality of human relationships in a business. And I think, again, as we are approaching, a new year, and this will go live and early in the new year, I think one of the questions people can really talk about, what I see leaders that's really good at what they're doing, and what we wanted to share today, and one of the insights, they ask themselves the question every year, which people in my, outer network and my inner network, do I want to improve my relationship with this year? And that's a question that goes again and again when you ask them. That's one of their core questions to themselves as leaders. And that's really what makes them better. They actually sit down and ask themselves that question about, the reflection. And some of them also have heard said that, where have I failed in my relationship building in the last year before they go in? Where are the gaps, and they take this really serious as part of their evaluation as a founder, CEO, team leader, an organization. It could also be as an organization you felt your relationship with a charity you're working with or a supplier, for that sake. It's been tough times. You maybe not been as consistent with how you were before.
Yeah. I mean, I can't really add much to that, to be honest. I think I just completely agree with everything you just said. We're a wonderful echo chamber, aren't we?
Yeah, we are. But also, I think, and I think also, like, if you see, and that was really interesting. We didn't start out with that. Well, one of the things I actually wanted to say in the beginning, and I actually think was really interesting I think you should go and listen to Phil, and of course you should listen to mine as well. But really, it's like all people from hospitality, but there's still a different angle. There's that the humanness and the connection about being human in hospitality and the power of that. And you will learn that actually the guests there's lots of the same patterns going on. And because also listened to a couple before we did this, and I speeded some of them up, I think you should go and listen to some of the guests I have not have on the show, and I might never get on the show. And I think that's really where it becomes interesting as you are zooming in and out on their learnings. And actually it comes back to when they start talking about their learnings and their failures. Actually, that's really the powerful bit in both our conversation. We should have said that from the outset, but just wanted to underline that.
I think as well that is almost a storytelling element, isn't it? Really, I mean, that's I realized even with most story, that's a very powerful one. But actually, when I conceptualized the show, I really wanted to highlight the fun elements, and so that's why I always ask everybody to consider their funny stories. The moments where they're out their depth or they've done something that's stupid or whatever, because there's learning on the back of that, but also that's the place where human connection is. If my objective with the show is to highlight to the world that this is actually an industry that you might not know actually anything about because you've got your information from the wrong place. Here's a series of stories of individuals who are doing great stuff. And look, here are some of the anecdotes that you might be able to see from within your own life. And that's the thing for me about storytelling is that's where the real power is, because people just can transport themselves into that moment and kind of almost, you're not there, but you understand how you would be feeling. You understand that, how you would probably react in that moment. Would you do anything differently from this person who's then gone on to become X, Y, Z or whatever? Yeah. And that's the place where people can then start to build a vision in their own life as to, is this a place for me? Could this, could the stories that I'm loving the sound of, could I bring these into my life? Of course you could, because they're happening every day in and around the industry.
Yeah, and I think also like you, another one of the learnings I can't remember who said that. I think it was Andreas Carlsen very early on in First Engineering. He said, like, we can all learn from some of the best leaders in the world, but we need to go and create our own algorithm. As that's an individual leader, as an organization, we can't copy you can't go and copy Sticks and Susie's culture, but you can definitely get inspired by what they do, and then you need to go build it. And I think really that's what some of the best leaders know, and exactly what it's about. It's actually you are the alchemist, I call it. Yeah, you're on the journey. You can craft your own route, and you can also craft your own organization. But it's really being on that alchemist journey of becoming better and better at crafting. So you end up with this goal thing, and it's only goal because you've been on the journey, you've done the work, and you've been through the struggle. You accepted the defeat. You changed direction when it was needed, and then you, in a way, in the end, you succeeded and actually got to the point of where you needed to be on your journey. And then you find out the journey is not over, you're going to continue. But you get to that alchemist area, and you think some of these names we've talked about today, you all think, oh, they're just so perfect, they just done so well, they're choosing right. But actually, they just failed a lot, and they went through the struggles. And I think that's really, really the key thing. One of the things I wanted to talk with you about, Phil, is like a thing that come up the last year in my conversations, and it came up by a bit by accident. Is like this, the craft of hospitality. We talked about this universal act earlier in the beginning of the conversation. Do you think we're losing that? as a industry? Many of my guests think so, and they're a bit scared of it, and they thought that special thing that made hospitality.
I mean, there's probably, I'm going to sit on the fence here again. There's probably a yes and no section to this answer for me. I mean, I think we're maybe a little bit victims of our own success from an industry perspective. And this is just, again, this is my own opinion from conversations and things that I just see and all of that from over the years. But the way I can see it is that in 2008-9, when we had the financial crash, obviously there was an awful lot of change happened in that moment. A lot of ownership structure change, a lot of ownership change, and the people who were investing in hospitality at that moment changed big time. And then, on the back of that struggle, the industry exploded. I don't think there's anybody can really deny that. It just went through the roof. And as a result of that, it became very, very appealing to profit houses, private equity, institutional lending, because they can see this thing that's just doing amazing and all of that. And so I think the answer probably for me is centered in it depends on who the owner is. Because for me, there's an awful lot of people that I've seen and had conversations with that care so deeply about hospitality, not just as a sector, but actually how they deliver that hospitality.
Yeah.
And I think the key rests in just the balance, right? I mean, I am not denying for a second that profit is not important, because it absolutely is. But if you're going into a business for profit purposes, then I think you need to redefine your purpose. Because for me, when you're doing things well and to the best of your capability with the right intention and all of that, that's when the profit comes. You shouldn't be going into business with purely the objective to make profit. And that might be whimsical and, very naively positive and all of that. But I don't care. Because the problem that you have if you focus too much on the profit is that, yes, then the hospitality gets stripped back. And the real world example for me, and this is not even podcast related as such, there was a brand in my childhood which I was so fond of, and that was Harry Ramsden's. If I don't know if you remember them, fish and chip place.
I think they're still around here and there, yeah.
Yeah, but not in the way that you would remember if you were kind of a kid of the 90s, as it were. You'd go in and into this lavish surrounding, white tablecloths, classic waiter and waitress outfits, with the white gloves and all of that, and just get a bloody good fish and chips. But you felt you were in a fine dining restaurant. It was simple but really effective concept. And then it had success, grew organically, and then a private equity company got a hold of it and ripped the heart out of it. And that to me it's really dangerous. I understand why people do it, because obviously they're motivated by making money and a great return on investment over time. But for me, that's kind of heartbreaking, because that's not why I think anybody goes into a hospitality business in the first place. I think they do it because they love to make people feel good. They want to give people an experience that they can think of, and even just apply that into your own life. I'm not a chef, but I am what I would classify as a maybe one up. I'm an elite home cook. Let's use that phrase. And the joy I get from cooking food for people, when they come round for the house, if it's expected or unexpected, that's hospitality. That's where it should, I suppose, the principle starts from. And then you build out a business accordingly from there. That's a really long-winded answer, isn't it, to the question? But so
I think you're spot on. Just finish, Phil.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think I'll just center back to that comment I made around the fact that I think the art of hospitality is not being lost, but it really depends on the ownership and the ownership's desire for that hospitality offer.
Yeah, I think came into what you positioned very early on when we dived into the servant leadership. So what is your view on leadership? Are you a servant leader? You want the gifts, and it doesn't mean you don't have to make a profit. I totally agree with you. Are you want somebody that takes, And, sometimes when certain finance forms becomes involved, not all, I know there's also good,
Totally.
because it's not black and white. There's also good private equity, there's also good venture capital, but actually that has been one of the challenges. And I think actually there's a lot of people who want to do it. And I think the circumstances that's been the last couple of years also just feels it's harder to do, and you need to find a different way. And that's actually where the servant leadership thing comes in. I think when things are tough, you still continue acting as much as possible as a servant leader. I think that's the only thing I want to add. I totally agree with you, and that was also where my thoughts were.
I think I would
down.
also add, if if I'm wrong in any of these assumptions, then please somebody reach out and let's have a conversation, because I'm also willing to have my mind changed, which is I think is another wonderful byproduct of running a show like we do, is that your mind is probably constantly changed as to maybe your base point learning, but then your learning goes off in a different direction because of somebody else's experience of whatever. So I am absolutely willing to have my mind changed if I'm 100 million miles off the mark.
What would be your couple more questions, and then Phil and I will wrap up, because we know this is what's happening. It will go crazy, and it is on the way to go crazy. We'll dial it in now, but there's a couple of questions I think we need to touch on. I think we both have some really good learning from all the interviews you had. What is your top advice for people? Because we want people to enter the industry and have a career, but from all the people you listen to and with your own, touch on it, what is the top advice you would like to give to people out there, either enter the industry or people that's in it?
Yeah, I think it probably depends on what stage you're at in your career building. Would determine the maybe the difference approach in answer to that. But I think if you're starting out in your career, or you're contemplating a life in hospitality, I think the key thing to remember is that there is, of course, no right or wrong way to build your own journey. You can take, I think you touched upon it perfectly with your sticks and sushi idea. With they can have a great culture, but you can't copy that, because it's not yours. You can be inspired by it for sure, but and I think kind of just to extend that a little bit is that there's so many different directions that you can take. And I think the one maybe piece of advice for anybody, and this is, I suppose, a very, very simple philosophy that's just come from pretty much everybody I've spoken to, is that, at the end of the day, stuff is going to happen. But how you respond to it is where your power is. It's that you can't choose to mope around and be defeatist about stuff, or you can choose to also get off your backside and if this is going to be tough, work through the tough, because also the golden moments are really on the other side of that. So I would just say to anybody listening who's even got a smidgen of an inkling that they might want to do this, I would just say come in and give it a go. But make sure you pick a good employer. And if you don't pick it the first time, don't let that be the definition of what you think the industry is.
You can definitely change direction overnight. You can maybe not achieve what you want to, but you can definitely change direction, thereby also employer. I totally agree with that. And I totally agree with you. I see this industry from all the happening conversations. I see lots of opportunities coming in this industry. And it's going to be, think about lots of people want to be involved in changing the world. And I think we talk about planet, the food system, the way we do things in hospitality becomes incredibly important, from leadership to how we source food and so on. And being part of actually influencing this is a huge opportunity in myself. And I think actually we're going to play a much bigger role than we think right now. And I think it's coming because a third of all emission comes from, the food industry, the way we produce and how we consume food and so on, and what food so you have a huge influence. And it's actually an industry where you very quickly can get into a leadership position, and therefore also actually how you build a better you, because leadership is always about being the best version of yourself. And I think I've been touching a couple of different industries, and I've heard other people doing that. They always say hospitality is about, there you actually have an opportunity. If you lean into it and you find the right employer, you can become a better version of yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd also probably add in as well, like you're right, you can grow very, very quickly in this, but also don't feel like you have to be in a rush to do that, because
yeah, it's a good one.
there's a lot of stories that I've listened to as I've been having them with my guests around the fact that, a lot of where the success comes from the life experience, and the fact that if you're immediately thrust into managing a team of 20 people and you don't have the experience of doing that, you can't expect to be a master at that on day one.
No.
But the key thing for me is that then, as long as the business realizes that as well, and they're the ones that are giving you the opportunity to do that, but then critically back you up on that moment where you're out of your depth, that's I suppose that's when the magic happens, because that means that you're both supporting each other. You're supporting them by stepping up, and they're supporting you by helping you step up. So, but especially when it comes to managing people, I think the length of time served can be a real friend to what a great leader you can become down the line, because you just have experienced way more stuff.
Yeah, and I think also that's very important for employers to understand. Actually, sometimes you get somebody in with more experience, they might have more demands on how they want their job to be organized, but actually their experience is so critical in people management, and you don't get that before you get a bit of gray hair. You might be able to manage things, but leading things is a different way, because you need to find yourself. And it takes into your late 30s before you really get calibrated. In my experience, talking a lot, that doesn't mean that people didn't get responsibility because they were intelligent enough. That lots of them did, but actually they had lots of things they had to fight with on the leadership journey. And actually, older you get, the better you are at that. So actually, give yourself time. You don't have to promote very quickly. Give yourself time. If I would do something, I had a huge responsibility of 250 people when I was 25, over 27 units. I was not ready for that. And I had some baseline training, but it was not enough. I should have waited 3 or 4 years. I've probably created even better results, both for myself and the business. But again, get more patient into your journey as well, because the journey is long, and you don't have to win in 5 years,
No, it can, the time can be your friend.
Yeah, that's
in that respect, for sure.
How do you keep consistent? How do you keep on doing it? Because I think that's really something you can call a momentum you take in. Every business wants to be consistent as well, but you're extremely consistent, Phil. You get this done every week. You have episodes out, special episodes.
And you. Like, when was the last time you missed an episode?
Not something I can remember. Really.
No. Absolutely. Yeah. I think ultimately there's probably two things in play. One, I just bloody love doing it. So, I suppose I love the conversation more than the other stuff that comes with it, which is the editing and coming up with social content and all of that kind of stuff. But but also then I almost feel now that, the podcast will be 5 years old next year.
Wow.
And in that time, there's a little bit of a following now. So I almost now feel accountable to them.
Yeah, it's funny enough. The accountability partners, I call them, because they'll start asking questions. Why there's no new episode?
Indeed, yeah. Indeed. But also, I think as well, as with most things, and this is something that I think has definitely come with my advancing years, is that I'm kind of geared up to do the stuff that gives me joy now. And I've always just enjoyed talking to people about their lives. Because I think I'm just deeply fascinated by why people do the stuff they do.
Yeah.
For maybe deeper learning about myself as to why I might have made choices that I did, or whatever, or whether I've just always been intrigued by the paths that people take. And that's why autobiographies are my favorite read, even to this day, because I'm still deeply fascinated as to why people do what they do. And even that's the other thing about being an avid autobiography reader, is that the vast majority of the ones that I read there, they all fall into what they do. There's not a lot of strategic planning goes on in the early years of your life. So if you are lucky enough to have a very clear vision very early on, then go with it, for sure.
And what is your favorite biography? What is your favorite book you read about somebody famous? Or
yeah, that's a good question. I mean, Johnny Wilkinson's was quite special, actually. Yeah, because and here's the other thing, right? This is maybe something that I think the industry can maybe do a bit better as well, is actually take the lead from other industries sometimes on things, or take snippets of information that would work and all of that. And, I think I am a big believer that, there's enough knowledge and capability out there in and out of industry for us to be able to kind of get around most things that come our way.
Yeah. It was very interesting you said that you do something you enjoy, and I didn't think I would enjoy this when I started.
Really?
I didn't really connect. It was not like I thought, this is what I need to go and do. And it was a bit by an accident I did it, and I did 10. And then I found out I actually enjoyed this. And actually I found out I think it's late into reflection and end of year reflection I do every year from the last quarter. And I found out it was actually part of the bigger purpose I was on. And actually that came from a professor I had in my business school that gave me this book, Good to Great. And then I went out trying building an organization and that actually came down to what I call today. It's not something I came up with in one night. It's like this, what does maverick leaders know and do? And actually I found out this is one of the best way to figure this out, is having these conversations. And then little by little, you get a little snippet of gold and a little becomes a lot. And now it's become into this living thing, this organism that is like a little bit bigger than me. You said like the audience, like that they expect something. And then I think I then over time also build systems to take care of what you said, the bit things that's not enjoyable. But that doesn't mean I don't have to go and do it, but I can time how long it takes now. And I have a process and a checklist. And I have that checklist. I feel bad if I don't do it on the Monday, Tuesday, and preparing myself for the next episodes. So I think it's a lot about that. It's like really about that. It connects with something bigger, and then you build system to make sure you're keeping yourself moving. Yeah. And then I have a mentor, as I told him, one of the questions when we meet, and he's like coach mentor, he should always ask me about, so what is the next step for the podcast? And what is your plan for the next year? So it forces me to always evolve it slowly, but I don't have like an ambition that it has to grow into like a Stephen Bartlett thing, or I don't go with the trends. I follow the deeper person, what the podcast was done originally. And actually, it's great if there's a big audience. It's also okay if there's not a big audience. It just have to give value to the people that's listening in, and they have to go and do something with it that will make the industry better. That's the most important.
And I think that's, it's an honourable thing to do as well, isn't it, in that respect? Because, we both have our roots in why we're doing this. It's basically just to make the world a better place. And in this case, our world is hospitality. And as long as I'm still driven by that, I think I'll keep having conversations till the cows come home.
And also it's one of the ways you can give without, you need to be a philanthropist or an investor or whatever it is. It's a way you can actually give huge value to people. And as you said, of course, it's our own MBA, but there's also the element of lots of people that listen to it, which I actually mind bubbled that people came up to me I'd never met and say, I listened to this episode with Nisha and I learned this. I'm so grateful you did that interview. And you think, oh, fucking hell, this is actually touching a lot of people. And therefore, it also thereby you become consistent because you feel good about helping other people, coming back to the act of hospitality,
Yeah, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with feeling good about what you do.
No, because that's a good driver for everything, isn't it?
For sure. I think there's sometimes, but this is a really cynical worldview. We can be made to feel guilty for enjoying the work that we're doing, but actually, I think if we all focused on that, then everybody ends up where they should be.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, because we need to be. There's enough negativity in the world, and we need to focus on more what's in our control and be a bit more optimistic about that, and actually trying to do our best. That's what's in our control every day.
Absolutely.
what is the one question you wished I've asked you, Phil, today? And what is it? And what would you have answered?
Basically, something along the lines of, I think, because you probably know that, or maybe you don't know, but I'd certainly in the early stages of the podcast, I talked a lot about the fact and used the phraseology that hospitality is the greatest industry on earth. And so the question would probably be something, why do you think that? Why do you think that hospitality is the greatest industry on earth? And I think we've kind of covered it a little bit today, to be honest, in terms of, I even more so, the more conversations I have, I think it just cements in my head. It doesn't take me further away from that statement. It really hammers it home to me that it's at the heart of everything human. It's making people feel special, giving them a great experience. These are the things that we all crave. And just, the thing that I always just say these days is, well, if it's not the greatest industry on earth, just imagine a world where it doesn't exist. And then, what does your world look like then, when you can't go down to your local pub and have a pint with your mates, or you can't go and have a good meal out somewhere, or you can't even go to a theatre because that's still hospitality as well. Or you can't interact with a lawyer because we spoke about that as well, as a point. So, so that to me it's the heart of every industry on the earth. So that therefore means that it has to be the greatest industry on earth.
Love it, Phil. Love it.
What about you?
Really,
this will be really deep. You're a properly deep human being, which I love, by the way.
I don't know if it's deep, but actually it's quite interesting. There was somebody that asked me, I got quite caught on that question about half a year ago or something like that, where somebody said, so when are you going to be running, your hospitality business again, Michael? And I said, and the first thing I said, to be totally honest, I said, I'm never going to do that. I've done that, because all the stress bottoms just flared up in me because what I went through in early pandemic. And then I was thinking about it. Actually, there is maybe a job I still need to go and do. And by the way, I don't know what it is, but it's a bit like I'm on this journey, what Maverick leaders know and do, but also I need to go and practice that in some kind of way. And I don't have that vehicle. So there's an element of that actually. It's a question I've been thinking a lot about. How would that look, and how would that look? How would that evolve, and how would that be happening? And I don't have the idea right now what exactly would be, but it's really, really interesting about how you reignite the old service. The best word I have for it, like the service leader in you, and actually you want to go back to that front line, and people think you must be absolutely nuts. You're doing so many other things where you don't have to engage with all that craziness. And there's some people that said that to me because I've asked them, well, what do you think about if I were about to, I don't have the 100% the idea, I just have this sixth sense, the journey, the alchemist, like it's part of the crafting. And I learned so much more now. How could it actually be, and go and do that? So yeah, that would be the question. I wish why don't
but
you?
Also on that though, the that is also, and this I think a lot is made of, rightly or wrongly. You've got to go and find your purpose, but I think therefore there's a level of stress comes with that if you don't feel you have found it yet, and so you kind of almost have to change your mindset towards believing that actually maybe my purpose is to find my purpose, because and I think the key to that is being open to opportunity and being open to conversations with people, because that's generally can then lead to opportunity. And there's from within my own world, many times I've had conversations with people over a coffee or a pint or whatever, where you think to yourself, I think you're my kind of person. And I think we're going to work together at some point, but I've got no idea what, and I've got no idea when. But I know that my brain will do its little thing over the course of time, and maybe 10 years from now, they'll go, oh, what about that guy that you had a pint with in that place? He did that thing. He could probably add value to this thing that you're, and that's when I think that would be my message around, like, yes, it's healthy to pursue a purpose, But if you don't know what that is, like, don't stress about it. Because otherwise you just waste your life stressing about something that you can probably find when you're ready.
Yeah, and I had a really good boss once that said that, you don't need to have goals and big strategies and what your life is about. But what you can do and must have is actually, if you don't know what it is yet, go and make yourself better. Learn something, craft something, become better, involve you in something, go deep in something, like you're reading biographies. Go and do that, and something will lead you to what the purpose is, actually, because it's not always sitting down and do the why exercise from Simon Sinek. That's a great book, but it can also be quite a frustrating book if you don't come out with an outcome in a way. But it's actually little by little you're crafting that purpose as you're making yourself better. So that's what made me think about that. Where can people find out? Where can they find your podcast? Where can they connect with you? Where can they ask you more brutal questions if they want to do that?
I'm always open to brutal questions. We're all the usual places, I guess. We're on Instagram, Hospitality Meets. Search for Hospitality Meets across all podcast apps. It'll be there somewhere. Also avidly on LinkedIn. Just look up Phil Street. You'll see me with a mug of coffee, as per the podcast branding.
It's like this, isn't it?
Indeed, yeah. It's in the wash today.
You have it on the back end.
What about you?
Yeah, well, LinkedIn, Michael Tingsager, and Hospitality Mavericks on LinkedIn again, and hospitalitymavericks.com. Please follow, and please reach out if there's something you want on the show we haven't thought about yet, so you can get better, because that's really what it's all about. Like, whatever we can do for making you better, then we done our job in a way. Any last thoughts, Phil? This was great conversation. I loved it.
It was way longer than I think we planned. You're going to miss your kids if you don't get away soon. No, I would say I'd just come back to the old conversation is the starter for everything. So never be afraid to ask somebody for a conversation. You never ever know where it might take you.
Yeah, and I would say little by little, a little becomes a lot.
Very good.
Thank you.
Good stuff. Thank you. And there we have it. It was so brilliant to get some time with Michael. He gives such care and intelligence to his craft, which I, for one, find incredibly inspiring. And equally, I hope you all took something away from our chat as well. We will, of course, be back at 8 p.m. next Wednesday with another cracking story from hospitality. So until then, have a great week, and we'll see you then.